Thank you for being here on your Saturday morning. I'm Justine. I am the President-elect for the Manitoba Chapter of the Wildlife Society and student representative for the Canadian section of the Wildlife Society. Today I'm going to kind of just be guiding the workshop along. However, I, like most of you, am not certified yet either. So this is going to be just as interesting to me as it will be to the rest of you, I hope. The way that this workshop kind of came about was at the joint AGM last year of the Manitoba chapter and the Canadian section. I had the opportunity to sit on the strategic planning session, and the topic that I wanted to weigh in on the most from a student perspective was certification. I believe that for it to become recognized with the Wildlife Society, it needs to be formalized in universities, and the resources need to be made available to students early in their academic career. So it was just a general point that I wanted to make, and then I met Don Barnes, who is one of our amazing speakers today, and he's so passionate and driven to pushing certification forward that it became an initiative that I really wanted to get involved with. So I spoke with the student chapter presidents across Canada, and what we found was that most of them don't know about certification, but pretty much all of them wanted to learn more about it, which is interesting because it's a program that's geared towards students. I spoke with Lenny Martin, who is the student chapter president of the U of W chapter, and her group said that it was something that they really were interested in and that a workshop would be great. So I spoke with Don, and here we are today. We have 4 really great speakers today who have a really long list of credentials, history with the Wildlife Society, commitments to associations and committees, so I'm just going to keep their introductions fairly brief. We have Don Barnes, who is the chair for the certification committee of the Canadian section. We have Melanie Dubois, who is the Western representative for the Manitoba chapter. We have Dr. Rick Baydack, who is the current president of the Canadian section, and we have Jonathan Wiens, who is the environmental specialist for Manitoba Hydro. So we're really fortunate to have them here today. Don and Melanie both traveled here to be here, so let's take advantage of that. Okay, Rick.
Okay. This again. Okay, hopefully that works. The reason we have the microphone hookup is one of the things Don decided, one of the things we talked about was, why don't we videotape this session today and distribute it across Canada to all the other student chapters or departments of, that offer wildlife credentials in our country. And we thought this would be a good part of what we're calling a little toolkit that we might develop so that other students in other locations can take advantage of some of the things we have to say today. So, as Justine said, I'm Rick Baydack. I've been on faculty here at the University of Manitoba for a long time. I should really retire, but I'm just having so much fun. Why would I retire? So, I'm still here. I've served in a variety of capacities with the Wildlife Society. It really opened my eyes when I went down to Colorado State University back in the late 1970s, in fact, and completed my PhD. It was in wildlife and fishery biology, and it was just expected that you become a member of the Wildlife Society at that university. And that really opened my eyes to the fact, yes, I knew we had a Manitoba chapter, it was just getting started. I really didn't know anything about it and why it became important. But what I've learned is that the Wildlife Society has really advanced my professional career. From those early days back in the 70s as a student, I've risen to a number of leadership roles in that organization, including the president of the Wildlife Society over a 4-year period. I was the Canadian section representative to the Wildlife Society Council, so it was like a 15-year commitment. You're on council for a number of years before you move up the ranks to the president. I've come back to Manitoba thinking, of course, well, I've always been in Manitoba, but thought my Wildlife Society connections were going to be reduced somewhat, and of course then they wanted me to become section president here of the Canadian section. So I've done that. I've been Manitoba chapter president etc., etc. So an awful lot of really, really great connections that I've made with the Wildlife Society, people internationally. It's an amazing organization. So I thought today I would lead off, before we turn it over to Dawn, who's going to give you the nuts and bolts about certification. I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about the Wildlife Society, what we do, why we matter to you in your future professional career. So let's have a quick look at a few slides here. I'll keep this very short, but it was founded in 1937. It's a professional, international, non-profit scientific and educational association that is dedicated to excellence in wildlife stewardship through science and education. So students really matter in this organization. The annual conferences of the Wildlife Society, the one coming up very soon in Cleveland in about 2 weeks' time, the percentage of students attending that conference right now in terms of early registrations is something like 60%. And there'll be close to 2,000 people at that conference. So about 1,200 students will travel from across North America to get to that location. And if you can get to that Wildlife Society conference, you'll see what I mean. It's the highlight of the year for any wildlife professional. So the mission is to enhance the ability of wildlife professionals, so it's dedicated to professionals and students, to conserve, diversity, sustain productivity, and ensure responsible use of the wildlife resource for the benefit of society. So this organization is there to help. It's there to further and advance your own careers. So there are a number of things like the mission, the professional community of scientists, technicians, managers, educators, planners, and others. So really it's a wide open organization. Seeks a world where people and wildlife coexist, relevant scientific information, and informed and caring citizenry. And finally, the focus is on science-based management. Science is critical here. Science-based management and conservation in a world dominated by human influence, responding to the needs of humans and wildlife. Okay? So, some details, some take-home points from all of this. There's about 10,000 members of this organization, largely based in the United States. Only about 500 of us in Canada who are members of the Wildlife Society. The trick is to become involved. If you're one of those 500, don't hesitate to become involved with the organization. In science and education, become involved. Student chapters, attending local meetings, attending regional meetings, attending national, international meetings. Be as some of my colleagues say, be a dirty shirt. Make sure people know who you are, and you'll see how that advances your career. Don't hesitate to just come up to a professional as a student and say, my name is, ABC, I'm interested in wildlife, and I'm especially interested in XYZ. And you'll be amazed how professionals in this organization are there to help you, to help mentor you along, to allow you to job shadow them, to take you out into the field and show you some of the things that they're doing. So definitely be a dirty shirt. And that wildlife-human interaction, the ability to actually educate the public with respect to wildlife and why wildlife are important. So last few things here. The organization is administered by a 12-person council that meets twice per year, but there's a lot of email communication that goes back and forth over the intervening months. There's a 4-person executive and 8 regional representatives. Canada we are our own region. And the day-to-day operations are run out of an office in Bethesda, Maryland, just across the line from Washington, D.C. So they're right down in the heart of the U.S. federal decision-making system. So 56 state and provincial chapters, 119 student chapters, 8 sections, as you see on the map, 25 what we call working groups that have interests in a variety of different things. Chapters and sections have their own elected officers, bylaws, etc., etc. And all of this is available, a lot more of this is available on their website, wildlife.org. So wildlife.org is the place to go. In Canada, we have provincial chapters in several provinces, not all, but Manitoba, Alberta, Ontario, BC, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Hoping to expand those to the remaining few provinces that we don't have a presence in. And then a variety of student chapters, as you see there. University of Winnipeg being one of our most recent additions to the list, so that's just great. Alberta, Lethbridge, Lakehead, Northern BC, Laval, Trent, MacEwan University, UBC Okanagan, UBC Vancouver. So the Canadian section was actually created in 2007. I've been involved, as I say, since the late 70s, and Canada was really never at the decision-making table. It was really disheartening because we were part of other sections, other US sections. I would run for an office as a section representative, didn't stand a chance. Only 500 members in Canada. You know, the state of Wyoming had something like 800 members when I was running against an individual from that state. So I automatically lost in any of those kinds of elections. So council realized that Canadians needed a presence, and they invited us to the table. We formed our own section in 2007, and basically what that required, as the final bullet there says, is a number of alterations to the general TWS bylaws. What I like to say is Canadianization of what they had written in the bylaws originally. So I've talked about the Canadian section. We've had meetings since we were formed in 2007. Here's some of the recent ones: St. John's, Newfoundland, Victoria, BC, last year in Winnipeg, as Justine mentioned, and this coming year in March in Canmore, Alberta. It's not a bad drive for students. You can probably make it in one day. So I urge you to consider that. It'll be, I think, March 22nd through 24th. So it's on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday of that weekend. I like to say we are at the table. The Canadian section now is at the decision-making table. There was a time a few years ago where I was president, Winnie Kessler from BC was the past president, and Art Rogers from Ontario was section rep, still is the section rep from the Canadian section. So 3 of the 12 council members were from Canada. So we had a tremendous presence at the table, so to speak, then. But we provide input, certainly at the council meetings, by email, and also the variety of Canadian members are involved in these various subcommittees, involved in publications, position statements, government relations, etc., etc., etc. It's open to students as well. Students can certainly become a part of any of these particular groups, and it really does help to advance your career. The highlight of the year for most of us in this profession is the annual conference. Winnipeg hosted it in 2015. We did an amazing job. We still have the record for the largest fundraising of any conference of the Wildlife Society. No one has yet surpassed our record. So we're pretty proud of that. For following Winnipeg, Raleigh, North Carolina, Albuquerque, New Mexico last year. This year we're in Cleveland, Ohio. Highlight there is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's going to be the first evening is going to be set up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is across the street from the convention center that we'll be in. So I can imagine that'll be a pretty wild and crazy night because there's a stage available. People can get up on the stage and, I guess, karaoke to their favorite rock and roll performers. So it should be interesting. And then next year is going to be an amazing conference in Reno, Nevada. Usually it's in September, October. Reno's an interesting one because it's the first time that the Wildlife Society is joining with the American Fisheries Society. We have 10,000 members, they have 20,000 members. Our conference generally attracts 2,000, their conference generally attracts 4,000. So we're thinking we're going to be over the top there, 6,000 plus professionals trying to interact. One of the few places in the world that could actually accommodate that large of a gathering is, of course, the state of Nevada, which also has casinos and the like, and Reno has apparently put an amazing offer in, and that's where we'll be next fall. I won't take. Well, we've already talked about the conference. I don't want to take too much more time. I'll just touch very quickly on certification, peer review process, recognizing those who meet educational and ethical standards. Okay, Don's going to talk a lot more about that, and I'll just leave you with this. Professional wildlife biologist. You might be thinking, well, am I one or not? Am I going to become one? My advice is, of course, you can become one. A person with demonstrated expertise in the art and science of applying the principles of ecology to the sound stewardship and management of the wildlife resource and its environment. So that's what all of you are here for, I'm sure, today. And we'll talk a lot more about certification and, and how that all can happen for you.
Manitoba chapter for putting on this workshop. As a committee, we've been working really hard to try and get certification known across the country, and this is a really good start. Okay, to keep myself in line, as Justine says, I tend to get very emotional. So I've set myself up with a little bit of an outline. So I'm going to first deal with why should we bother with certification. Then an overview of the requirements that are needed to be a certified wildlife biologist. And then some current problems that students are encountering, and at the same time trying to impart some advice to anybody that's thinking of going through the application process. And then some of our initiatives. The Canadian section has been doing a lot to promote certification across the country, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. And then a little bit about the future. So let's start off. Okay, as working biologists and students, we have to be increasingly aware of public perception. And the public expects us to be working in the natural resources field as professionals and according to professional standards. So back in 1977, the Wildlife Society initiated a program, the Wildlife Biology Certification Program, which was geared to producing foresters, or producing professionals. And in order to make sure that the educational and professional experience were being met, this review board was made. Now, as Rick mentioned, there's a review board and there's 8 members. And this is something the Canadian section is very proud of, is that we wanted to make sure there was a Canadian on that board. So we made a recommendation that a Canadian should be on that board. Well, the 7 other sections said, hey, we should have a representative on that. So it just ended up that head office thought this is a good idea. So now the way it stands is you've got a real ally in your corner. You've got Al Arsenault from Saskatchewan, who is going to be part of the board that's evaluating your application. So that's a really good step in the right direction. And I'd just like to remind you that the Wildlife Society is the only organization that provides this peer-reviewed certification for wildlife biologists. Now, it just seemed as if the Wildlife Society got the ball rolling, and then a few years later in 81, the Ecological Society said, hey, this is a good idea. So they started a certification program. And shortly after that, in 1998, the Fisheries Association started this certification program. So this certification program, you're not alone. Like, there's a lot of disciplines out there that think it's a good idea. So with all this talk about certification, there has to be a reason why you should be certified. So we were kind of curious, and we polled our members of the Canadian section, and we asked them, why do you think it's important to be certified? So here are some of the reasons. 1, it enhances the credibility of the profession. And 2, and this is one of my favorites, is that when I got my degree, I was very proud of it. You know, I had a graduate degree. I never thought I had a graduate degree. So then I said to myself, okay, it would be nice to be known as a professional. And I looked around, and sure enough. So I've gone through the process, and being a certified wildlife biologist has just added that little extra level to my career. There are other reasons like quality control. It advances the regulation of wildlife occupations and facilitates community and sharing best practices. Now, this is something that we as a committee, and I'll talk more about the certification committee later, but these last three, we're trying to get national standards right across Canada for wildlife biologists. And so these are some of the aspects that we'll be looking at. And then it eliminates jurisdictional barriers. If you're in BC or Alberta, you'll know that they have their own certification program for biologists. But it's very politically legislated. So if you go out of Alberta or BC, you can't apply that to any of the other ones. I guess one of the advantages of the Wildlife Society is not based on legislation. It's based on your ability as a biologist. So it can be transferred right across. So that's a real advantage. And the more we more we make courses more achievable for students to get these accreditation. And I'll be talking a little later about a curriculum review committee that's going to be going right across the country and looking at the different courses. So this is one advantage of the certification program. It guarantees a good suite of courses that you as students can take. Plus, it's a real job hiring asset. You can show that you're something to do with certification, just puts you a little bit above other people that are applying. And facilitates communication with other professions. If you're talking to a forester who's a professional, it just makes that dialogue a little bit better. And you're going to find that with your certification that you're going to be leaders in promoting conservation. So those are some reasons why. So let's look at how do you become certified. So starting right basically, there's two stages. There's an Associate Wildlife Biologist that's geared to students and looking at your coursework. And then once you've achieved that, then you can go on for the Certified Wildlife Biologist. It's important that, I had to put this in, I'd forgotten all about it, but it's very important that you have to be a member of the society before you apply. Okay, for the educational requirements, there's a few important factors that you should be made aware of. There's this semester hour, and that's what they use in the United States to gauge the requirements. So, one semester hour is one lecture or one lab per week per term. So in other words, if you have, the requirement is 6 semester hours, that's roughly 2 courses. Okay, so this is just something you have to wrap your head around as you're going through this. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that technical courses and university courses are treated equally, as long as the end product is a degree. And applicants are urged to present evidence. Like if you have some deficiencies, and you probably will, you can build a case for yourself. And this was an issue a little bit, and it's been resolved. The term length in Canada and the United States are sometimes different. So we went through a little bit of this summer. Rick was part of that discussion. And when we talked to the chair of the certification review board, he agreed, no, we'll just treat them equally. So those are a few of the things you should keep in mind as we go through. Very quickly, I just want to show you the 5 biological areas that you need. Wildlife management, roughly about 2 courses. And in a lot of schools, they don't have wildlife management, but if you have conservation biology, you can use that as long as there's some focus on management. Wildlife biology, in the definition for wildlife for the Wildlife Society, basically they deal with birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. There's some room for insects, but those are the main 4 groups. So when you're looking at courses, at least one course has to be either mammalogy, ornithology, or herpetology. But when I went through Guelph, way back in the 70s, what we had there was a course called Wildlife Biology. And it covered all 3. And those kind of courses are applicable too. Ecology, just one course in ecology, general plant or animal. Zoology, there's 9 semester hours or 3 courses, and that can deal with vertebrates or invertebrates. Botany, this is the one that stops a lot of people in their tracks. I've talked to so many people that this is a stumbling block. So what they want is for you to have at least one course deals primarily with plant taxonomy or plant identification. If you come from a forestry background and you've got dendrology, silvics, or silviculture, that's acceptable too. But we can talk more about this area later. There's 6 non-biology course areas: physical sciences, chemistry, physics, soils, geology, 1 stats course, quantitative sciences. The one area I didn't mention, I should have, I guess, is GIS. GIS is becoming more and more quantitative science now. It's not, they try and keep away from introductory courses, but any advanced courses, that can be used too. The humanities, so 3 courses have to do with economics, sociology, literature, foreign languages, those are all applicable. Communication, this is one area that a number of students, I included, had problems. And so what they're looking at is courses that improve your communication and writing skills. If you're lucky enough to be in a university where that's very high profile and there's no problem. What I had to do, at that time I belonged to Toastmasters International, which was an international organization, and their main goal was to make you a better speaker. Well, I was able to build a case and use that. So that's what I mean. Be creative. If you have some deficiencies and you can think of some experience that, for example, I think even if you're running an executive, like student chapter, that might be used. Okay, so make sure that you, as I said, be creative. Policy, administration, and law, that's, that can be an area where it's, it can be hard. They've added a couple of other types of course options. And one was in any courses dealing with understanding social, political, or ethical decisions. Or the last one is one course in human dynamics. You know, and so that covers a lot of issues, probably women's issues, that kind of thing. I know there's some courses, women's issues in science. Well, that could be fit in there too. Okay, lessons that we learn. And this has been mentioned already. Start early. Unfortunately, a lot of the blame isn't on you. If you just find out about it in 4th year, it becomes that much harder to get these courses. So earlier on, you can plan. That's why this workshop is great, because it lets you know that there's this out there, so you can do some planning. And there are a lot of professors like Rick on staff that can help you out. One thing that a lot of people don't do is that in the application, you've got to list your courses and put them according to these different categories. Well, what some students do is if they can't figure out where a course goes, they don't bother putting it in. My advice to you is put down every course you have. And the reason is, in talking to the chair of the Certification Review Board, he said, we'll move courses around. He said, we're there to help you. Like if they see a course that's better than this, they'll move it around for you. But you've got to have the courses down. So it's another lesson. And as I said, deficiencies, and you will have some deficiencies in the course. Make sure that you put a case forth. And if you look at the application form, there's a space in the application form especially for that. You can build your case up. And as much as possible, if you can get a reference from an instructor, that helps your case too. References. This has caused a lot of grief over the years. When I went through, you needed 3 CWBs, or Certified Wildlife Biologists. Even though they've reduced it down to only 1, this is one of the main reasons why people throw up their hands and say, the heck with it, because they can't locate a Certified Wildlife Biologist. So the Canadian section, what we did through the certification committee is we reached out to all the certified biologists across Canada, and we said, would you be a mentor and eventually a reference? And we've got a nice list of about 20 people, and the nice thing about it, it's right from the Yukon, BC, right through the East Coast. And so there's a really good chance that if you're going through, we can act as the go-between between you. So we're trying to help as much as we can. And just to remind you, one reference has to be from a professional outside of your organization. Okay, once you have all the ducks in a row and you've done everything, then you can submit an application. And the application goes to the Certified Review Board, and you have to dig deep and get that $115 US. That doesn't be worth it. You'll be asked to check off a box that says, I comply with the Code of Ethics and Standards for Wildlife Conduct. make sure you go to the website and read about that, because it's really important, because you've got to check that box. So it's always nice to know a little bit about it. So a little bit of heads up on this part of the application. Okay, that's very quick and dirty how you get a certified associate certification. Now for the wildlife biology requirements, this associate wildlife biologist lasts for 10 years. Within that 10 years, you've got to accumulate at least 5 years of experience. And once you achieve these 5 years, then you can apply. However, if by chance, after the 10 years, you still haven't gotten the 5 years, but you're into a job, and if you have 2 years, you can make application for those up to 3-year extension, and that helps out. And as usual, there's a little bit of a fee for that, but it's not as much as the other ones. Now you might be wondering, what is professional experience? Well, there's a manual out there, and in this lovely brochure that we worked so hard on, in here there's a reference to a manual. There's a manual put out for this certification, and in there they do break it. They've got a page there where they break down what a professional is doing and what a technician is doing. And they cover decision-making, work implementation, scope of authority, reporting, agency representation. So that might give you a little bit of an idea of what kind of professional experience you need. Now, there's other ways to become a certified wildlife biologist. A wildlife biologist who has worked in the field, has accumulated 5 years, can apply without having a certified wildlife biologist. The only difference is that you have to present your education and your experience in one goal. Also, if you had your Associate Wildlife Biologist certification and you let it lapse, you can upgrade that to, once you get the 5 years experience, even though you let that lapse, you can upgrade it from an associate to certified wildlife biologist. So there's a lot of clauses there that they try and help you out. Then, if you've worked in the field for 20 years, you can use that experience in lieu of required courses. Okay, renewal. To make sure that you're continuing to work, once you've got your Certified Wildlife Biologist certification, in order to ensure that you're following the right standards, you have to put in 80 hours of professional activity. And then every 5 years, you document your 80 hours of activity, apply, and if they agree, then you can continue on being a certified wildlife biologist. This has been really problematic in the past, and lately the certification liaison committee that I'm part of, we have made some really useful recommendations for improvement in this area. And we've sent them into the executive, and I think people are going to be a little happier with that. Okay, some initiatives that the Canadian section has been doing. A few years ago, the Canadian section polled their members and they asked, what issues do you think we should tackle? And certification was ranked very high. However, in subsequent years, the number of certified wildlife biologists hasn't grown that much. We still only have 45 right across Canada. Unfortunately, in the States, it's close to 1,600. So, something had to be done. So, in 2017, the Canadian section created the certification committee with two goals. One is to work towards making this certification a little more appealing to Canadians. And the other one, which we won't touch on too much today, in fact not at all, is to work towards establishing national standards for wildlife professionals across Canada. So in populating this committee, it became really important that we make the structure representative of all regions of Canada. And so right now we've got it right from BC right to Newfoundland. So we've got good representation right across, and so it really helps in representing the whole country. So we've been very busy. East Coast, which was always a very vibrant area for wildlife, the Wildlife Society, it's fallen, it hasn't done so well in a number of years. So we're trying to make some inroads, and there's this Atlantic Society of Fish and Wildlife Biologists. And I've submitted an article about certification for their fall newsletter. Mike LaForge with the Newfoundland chapter, he's reaching out and trying to get certification much more of a profile at their AGM in Corner Brook. And we've made some really positive steps in getting student chapters started in some of the universities and institutions. So a lot of good stuff's happening on the East Coast. Central and Western, we have this session. And at our AGM in Alberta, we have another workshop planned with dealing with certification. So a lot of good things happening. In addition, we've been in contact with organizations like Ducks Unlimited, Chris Smith, who is part of our executive, and I think he's been really good at making connections. He's been in touch with the CEO there, and we're talking to field biologists, so there's really a lot of nice connections being made there. We're still trying to find out how best to contact some of the groups out there, but so that's a work in progress. As I said, the Ecological Society, we've been making some initial contacts with them, and also with the fisheries, because we're wondering if we can learn from each other. So that's the idea of contacting them. There's been 3 developments lately that have really helped our cause. The Canadian section has created the Curriculum Review Committee. So what we're doing, very ambitious, but we're looking at the curriculum of key universities across Canada and trying to see if we can change the curriculum to be a little more practical. The impetus of this came from Lou Carbon out of Alberta. And he, like a lot of us, have been frustrated with this movement away from practical courses. So that's in its infancy, where there's Rick and I and a number of people still have to work on this, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. And as I said, Al Arsenault, 3-year appointment on the Certification Review Board. That's good for anybody applying. And I'm on the Certification Liaison Committee, and there's only about 5 of us, and we deal with a lot of issues that come up, and we put recommendations into the 12-seat executive that Rick was talking about, and these are aspects to make the certification run smoother. Okay, the future. There is a genuine commitment by the current president of the Wildlife Society and the president-elect to work towards making certification more attractive to Canadians. And as proof of this commitment, the president-elect, even though he's really busy, he actually took time out and wrote an article that we published in one of our newsletters. And also, he opened the door. He said, anybody having any difficulties, let me know. Typical Canadians, we're very shy. Nobody so far has mentioned anything. But the offer still is out there. So besides the positive vibes south of the border, I'm really encouraged that this certification is really picking up momentum in Canada, which is a good thing. So, answer the question, future looks bright. Okay, that's it.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathan Wiens. I am a Certified Wildlife Biologist, and I'm very happy to be here this morning. I want to thank Justine and Rick and Don for inviting me. I think the best way that I could probably contribute to this workshop is perhaps just giving a bit of an overview about my experience becoming a Certified Wild Biologist and why I think it was very valuable for me in my career, and perhaps encourage you to consider it as well. Obviously, you're here this morning on a Saturday, so you're probably considering it for part of your career advancement, and I think I can hopefully give you a bit of insight as to how it benefited me. I was probably in your shoes about 10 or 15 years ago, depending on what stage you are in your academic career. I graduated from the University of Manitoba with a Bachelor of Environmental Science in 2004. I then went on to do a graduate degree. I got a Master's of Science degree from the University of Manitoba. Rick Baydack was one of my advisors, and that happened in 2008. So I was probably much like you, not really sure where I wanted to go in terms of a career. I knew I liked working in the environmental field. I knew I liked working with wildlife. But I wasn't quite certain how I could translate that into a career, how I could get a job out of this, how I could set myself apart from the dozens and dozens of other graduates and students that were sitting around in all my classes. So luckily enough, I had great mentors. Someone like Rick Baydack was very helpful to me when I was going through my schooling. And so near the end of my undergraduate degree, I decided, I really should consider this certification process, and especially the Associate Wildlife Biology program. And so what I did is I worked with student advisors, much like I'm sure you have as you've gone through your academic career, and tried to select courses that aligned with what the Associate Wildlife Biology program required. And so that meant I probably had to take courses that I might not have been as keen to take. There might have been some plant stuff, zoology stuff that may not have been my first preference, but upon reviewing the curriculum, I realized that was probably in my best interest to make sure that not only did I graduate with an environmental science degree, but I had the option of getting this added certification, which I knew would be beneficial to me, just by listening to Rick and participating in the Wildlife Society and learning about how that can help me. And so I guess it probably was just as I started my graduate program, I got my Associate Wildlife Biology certification, and then I obviously started my 5 years experience I did before I could become a Certified Wildlife Biologist. So I hope I can be someone you can relate to in your early part of your career and your academic process. And so I'll just spend a few moments. I won't try to reiterate anything that Don said or what Rick said. They've got amazing information. But I've used my certification to help me in my career. I started working with the provincial government 2008, 2009. At that point, I did have 2 degrees, and plus I had an Associate Wildlife Biology certification. And I know it helped me become hired by the provincial government as a natural resource planner. Spent 3 or 4 years gaining experience. I was doing watershed planning, and it wasn't specifically wildlife-related work, but it was related. It was a lot of conservation-related work. I worked with Ducks Unlimited. I worked with lots of different agencies that did on-the-ground conservation work. So, although I had a specialty in wildlife for my certification, it wasn't exactly what I was working in, but I know it helped. It didn't take long, and I got an opportunity to move within government to the wildlife branch. And so that branch is specifically empowered to enforce the Wildlife Act and to make decisions about wildlife management in the province. And I know without a doubt there was a lot of applications that the government received for that job. But my graduate degree from the University of Manitoba and my Associate Wildlife Biology degree, I know that helped set me apart from other candidates who were interested in working in government in that position. So it didn't take long after I worked within the wildlife branch for a number of years. I had enough experience developed to get certified as a Certified Wildlife Biologist. So I had my academic requirements, and I had my experience working in the industry and in the field. And then I applied, working through someone like Don. He wasn't on the board at the time, I don't believe, but he people like him. I met them at one of these conferences actually, and I actually spent quite a bit of time just going through the application process, sitting down with some of the review board members, and making sure I had put all my ducks in a row. And there wasn't a workshop like this available at the time. You kind of had to just network and try to get to know people who were involved. But I was fortunate enough to get through that process and become certified, which was quite a highlight. I subsequently moved on to work at Manitoba Hydro, and Manitoba Hydro is a big corporation. They have, right now we've been working through a number of major projects all across the province. There's a growing interest in ensuring that hydro projects consider and work within environmental legislation, but also try to take into account making improvements to how the corporation performs environmentally. So there's still lots of room for improvement, but having someone apply for the job at Manitoba Hydro who had a Certified Wildlife Biology background would only help, I think. I think they saw that as a benefit to hiring myself, because I had perhaps a bit of a higher level of credibility with respect to issues that they were struggling with, which was how to make sure the projects that they're working on are minimizing their effect on the environment. And so I know that the certification helped me in a very tangible process of getting hired at Manitoba Hydro. And even subsequent to that, I don't know if many of you have taken courses in environmental assessment. That's an area that I work in quite a bit now for new development projects. But there's hearings that we often have to go through that the provincial government and landowners and others are involved, and regulatory agencies, and they want to hear from professionals about what are the real impacts of the project. And professionals from all different walks of natural resource development are involved, and they ask the regulators and the public, and people ask a lot of pointed questions about how these particular big development projects are going to affect the environment. And one area that I felt that I know I was quite qualified to support is questions about impacts to wildlife. And, when you're on a stand in front of a board and you're testifying on behalf of the corporation, to have a certification when you're discussing the projects that you're working on, the projects you're working on, or the wildlife species of interest on a given project, it really helps. If you can demonstrate that you are certified, that you have that credibility, you follow professional guidelines, and you've got the experience, it sets you apart and gives your testimony added credibility. And not only as a person who works perhaps for government or for Manitoba Hydro, but if you happen to find yourself working for a consulting company, I know that when I review consultant applications for work for hydro, if someone is certified, I know that makes their application to work for hydro as a consultant much more attractive, because I can look at that application and say, yes, I will have confidence that this person is following the professional guidelines, that they will be respected by governing bodies, by regulators, and it takes the ambiguity of, you know what you're getting when you've hired someone who's got these credentials. And so that's some of the processes that I've experienced in my last 10 to 15 years as becoming a certified wildlife biologist. I think there are some tangible benefits. If you are in the environmental field and you feel like there's a future in working with wildlife, I think it's worth your time to work with your student advisor, get a hold of Rick, get a hold of some other, you can go on the website, you can see what the other mentors are who are certified wildlife biologists in the province. Attend some TWS meetings, get to know people in the industry or in the field, and build a bit of a network. And by going through this process, I think it will help set people apart. And there's not a lot of us in the province, and there's not a lot of us in Canada, so you'd be among a pretty small group. It's growing, but there are more and more people interested in this, and it does help set you apart and demonstrate your dedication to being a professional in this field. Getting a BSc or an MSc is great. I got it. It certainly has helped my career a lot. But getting certified I think it demonstrates the act to not only employers but to others that you've taken that extra step, and it also puts you in a good community. I know I can, now that I'm certified with this program, I can pick up the phone and I can relate to other biologists all across Canada and the US, and we have something in common. We don't just have a university degree, which is great, but we also have this interconnection within the Wildlife Society that I think helps build your credibility and helps you network, which I think everyone knows by now is really a great way to advance your career. So yes, I think I had a couple notes here. I think it is worth most people's time. If anything I've said here kind of resonates with you, I think it is worth the time. I think it is worth the effort. It will take some effort to make sure you've got the right courses. Don't get discouraged if you don't find you have all the boxes checked off. Like Don said, I didn't have some of the courses that I needed, but I made a case for a bunch of them, and the review committee, who I worked with pretty closely, accepted them. So if you go through the application for Associate Wildlife Biologist, it's like, shucks, I don't got that plant one, I don't have that stats one, or I don't have this other course. Don't just dismiss it, throw it off. Talk with the certification committee. Pick up the phone, email Don, email Rick. Probably ways that you can work around that and make a case for yourself. Because I know I didn't have everything, and it would have been easy just to throw the application in the back or forget about it, and we're just working on your courses. But I think it is worth your time and effort, and it isn't really a lot of money. So those are the main, I think, barriers that a lot of students probably consider. And I think I've kind of rambled on a little bit long enough here, but I want to just let you know, if you want to look me up, I'm a certified wildlife biologist. You can find me on LinkedIn or Manitoba Hydro or whatever, and shoot me an email if you have questions going forward. I think Don and Rick are probably your best contacts because they've got a lot more experience on the education side, but I hope I've been able to convey a bit of a message as to how young professionals can really benefit from this process, and I think it's only going to become more and more beneficial moving forward as careers and jobs from government and industry look for more information, more assurances that the people they're hiring are qualified. And this probably goes the same for other careers, just like nursing, doctors, lawyers. Anytime you can demonstrate that you're part of a group that has a higher level and higher standards, it's going to set you apart. So, just going through my notes really quickly here. I think I've covered all the bases. I can probably echo some of the other things that Rick said. I've been involved in the Wildlife Society for probably 14 years now. I've been past president of the Manitoba chapter. I work on the Conservation Affairs Committee. So TWS certification and being part of the Leadership Institute of the Wildlife Society, it can only enhance your career. And if you have an interest in working within wildlife in your career, I think it's a small investment, and I think it'll really help pay off. So any questions, I probably can't stick around much longer, but shoot me an email if you want, look me up, and I'll be happy to kind of help you along. Thanks a lot.
But, so I actually work for Agriculture Canada, And I didn't get my certification until 2012. So I got my undergrad in '99, and then my master's. Rick was my supervisor. Undergrad '94, master's '99. It was a while ago. Anyway, because I work in agriculture, I work with people who are not wildlife biologists. They are professional agrologists. They are engineers and people who have been trained in a very different field from me. And what I deal with is wildlife agricultural interactions. So often, I am the only voice at the table for wildlife. And sometimes it gets very contentious. Very contentious. You know, I got used to being called, impolite names, which I can't repeat here, but, squirrel kissing, bunny hugger. It's like sort of the mild things. But the more and more I dealt with people, the more I realized they didn't have an understanding of my background and what I was bringing to the table when we were discussing things like species at risk and the impacts of agriculture on species at risk. So that sort of pushed me to look at the certification program because other people there, like I said, they were PAs, they were engineers, they belonged to professional organizations. And so there was an understanding among them of what that certification meant. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to get certified so that I can then say, I'm a certified wildlife biologist, it's like a PA. So even if they'd never heard of it before, having those letters and being able to just tell them shorthand, it's like a PA, then it really did change the conversation because sometimes I would get pushed on things. I'd say, after going back and forth on all the million reasons why we couldn't do that, I would just say, look, I'll risk my certification. If I sign off on this, I'm not going to do it. And they could respect that because they understand that there's an ethics review associated with their certification. So I'm not going to risk my certification. And so it also made it easier for when I was interacting with people in Environment Canada, when I could say, I'm a certified wildlife biologist. So then right away they knew, oh, okay, you're not just an Aggie who's pretending to know something about wildlife. So that was really helpful. And I have students throughout the year. In fact, one of my students is here. Aiden, nice to see you here. and I really promote belonging to the Wildlife Society and getting certified because I do a lot of hiring within Ag Canada. And a lot of the hiring I do is for positions that don't require a PA. I am looking for wildlife people. And we're hiring for that type of wildlife ag interaction. So when I see, okay, lots of people have a BSc, more and more people have a master's, but again, it's that certification that right away it's shorthand for me, where if I was to see that, which unfortunately is, as Don pointed out, there aren't a lot of us out there, but at least if you're a member of the Wildlife Society, if you are, on the road to becoming certified, then right away, okay, I know what that means. And it became a point of personal and professional pride for me to get that certification because, as I said, I waited quite a while after I graduated because unlike a PA, right now it's not as sort of built into hiring practices as it is elsewhere. If you look, Alberta has a professional biologist, and what they do is in all of their postings now, well, a great deal of them, you look, and it will say you must be a professional biologist, or the equivalent must qualify for, and that's something I'm sure the certification program is looking at that we need to start building into it here in Manitoba. So really getting that certification, it can be a lengthy process. It can be, administratively, again, because I was doing it like 12 years after I had graduated. I had to dig up old transcripts and course descriptions, and fortunately I had spent enough time just kind of kicking around the university. I had all the courses that I required. So I was able to get that, and because I had been working for 12 years already, I had the experience covered. And fortunately, Rick helped me a lot with my application. I actually went through and I looked, and I think I had 8 or 9 drafts. I think I had at least 2 drafts from you, 2 drafts from other people who reviewed my application. But I've tried to keep up with that to make sure that as I'm going along my career, that I keep my CV and all of the stuff associated with certification current. But what was funny is that when I got invited to come here, I'm like, oh, am I still considered certified? Because you have to renew your stuff every 5 years, right? You got to keep track of everything that you're doing. And believe it or not, 5 years goes like that. And I realized, I'm like, oh, I never did submit. I'm actually not certified right now. But I've submitted my paperwork. I know I meet the requirements. But that is another thing that your certification can do for you, is it helps you keep on top of what you're doing in your profession. And it really serves as a template, because sometimes when you get out there and you're working, you're just working, right? And it's busy, and there are deadlines and field work and paperwork and budgets and all this kind of stuff, and you lose track of, am I really progressing as a professional? And by having the certification renewal, then it forces you to look at, okay, am I actually doing things that progress my career? And one thing that I noticed is that they've added mentorship, which I thought was fantastic. I'm fortunate in that I have students, but I've never really sort of kept track of that mentoring. And I think what's good is that if all of us certified wildlife biologists have to prove our mentorship, that means we need mentees. So people might be a little more apt to take on someone because they recognize, oh, geez, this really is part of my professional development, and I need to do this in a deliberate and intent way and keep track of what we're doing. Not just to benefit the mentee, but then also to contribute to your professional development and recertification. I don't know what else I need to cover other than, it is worthwhile. I think Jonathan did a really good job of highlighting the different ways that it gave him an edge when he was looking for specific wildlife jobs. And I tell you, when you go outside of that field, when you're doing wildlife work in non-traditional fields, like Agriculture Canada, it really does help you in ways that you really never thought it would. And I use it all the time, and it's very helpful. And association with the Wildlife Society is fantastic. And the more people that participate, the better and stronger the organization is, and you get a lot from it.
Okay. So I just wanted, you've heard all the reasons why you should become certified. You've heard all the reasons about the certification program. And what I want to try to do with the last 10 or 15 minutes here is show you actually how you do it at the University of Manitoba. Because we've taken a very proactive role, and we've actually, with the help of the student advisors up in the Dean's office and the Faculty of Environment, Earth and Resources, we have designated University of Manitoba courses that meet each of those requirements, each of those sections that Don highlighted earlier today. If you're in the co-op program and you go to the either, I don't know if it's under the course numbers, Environment 2900, Environment 3900, you'll notice Leslie this morning put up this little guidebook that we've developed for the U of M students. If you're in my field investigations course, you go to the Environment 3020 website and you'll find this little guidebook up there as well. If you're in the wildlife management course, Dave Walker's Environment 4000, he's planning to put that guidebook up as well. So basically, if you're not at the University of Manitoba and you want a copy of it, you see my email address up there. Just don't hesitate to email me and I'll send you what we have developed at the U of Manitoba. And this is what Don has suggested. We're going to try to take this idea across Canada and get at least one advocate at every Canadian university or college that deals with wildlife to think about doing this at their own institutions. So some of these slides we've heard about. What is it? A peer review process recognizing those who meet strict educational and ethical standards in the profession. It's administered by wildlife.org. It's based upon meeting a minimum of educational experience and ethical standards. And if you go to their website, you'll certainly find all that detail. I think we've already kind of talked a lot about this. It's the recognized credential. Both Jonathan and Melanie mentioned that they look for it in hiring. I think we're going to see that continuing. It's built into legislation in BC and Alberta. Not necessarily our certification program, but a certification program in those two provinces as well. Now Quebec is looking at the same thing. And I know Don is going to be able to turn them around and say, join the Wildlife Society certification program. Because it really is the best, and it's cross Canada, it's international. You could show it in any country in the world that you're certified as a wildlife biologist. Certainly that professional affiliation is important. In some cases, it might increase your starting salary. You might get a little bump. And it certainly adds credibility to your application. So the criteria are guided by specific course and knowledge categories. The other thing I want to say is the Certification Review Board, though, as Don suggests, will determine if the application satisfies the intent of the minimum academic requirement. So what does that mean? Basically, that means you've got to sell yourself. This is like writing an exam. You have to prove to that board. I served on the board for a 3-year term. You have to prove to that board that you deserve to be certified. And some students who basically fill it in, the application form is an online form, you fill it in, it looks pretty standardized, but the commitment has to come through. You have to write your own course descriptions. You don't just cut and paste off your course outline. You certainly don't pick, the few words you find in a university calendar. You've got to show the dedication of how that course actually connects to the specifics of what that section of the application form is asking you. Okay, so those are a few bits of advice. The guide I'm going to put up next is, well, we're trying to get the Dean's office to post it. I just checked this morning. Jason Jorgensen had said he was going to get it posted this morning. I don't see it up there yet, but eventually it will be on our little home page here. Let's have a quick look to see if it's there. Somehow I don't think it is, but I assume you know this little web page. It's not going to move on me. But essentially it's the undergraduate programs in co-op option. And I thought somewhere in here we were going to see a listing of the certification guide. But it's not up yet, but it should be up very soon. And as I say, it certainly is up on those courses if you happen to be in them. So what does this thing look like? Let's just roll this a little bit. And we do want this. Get rid of this. Okay. That's loaded too big. Okay, so there is sort of a little preamble that basically suggests to you that what you're going to find below are a number of listed courses. And there's lots of them, you don't need them all. But these can be used to attain the credential of an associate of the Associate Wildlife Biologist. As I say here, you must explain how each course meets the criteria in your application. And there's space for you to do that in each of the sections that Don described earlier. Simply completing the course is not sufficient. In other words, you simply say, I completed this course, you will be rejected automatically. Bolded courses, I've specified here, bolded courses are especially important, and early planning is important. I try to get the Dean's office to start working with students in University 1 in their entry years, because that's where you really start to plan, because you are predicting into the future 3-4 years. You need to take the prerequisites well in advance. As Don says, if you're in your 3rd or 4th year, you might be in tough year to try to get certified. Not always, but you might be in tough. The application form itself is available there. wildlife.org, learn professional development certification. So let's have a look at some of these examples. As Don says, wildlife management, 6 credit hours required. I recommend you do the 2 bolded courses. We know from past experience those are acceptable to the certification board. So we have ecosystem management, Aaron McCann's teaching it this year, environment 4050, wildlife management, environment 4000, that Dave Walker's coordinating this year with myself, Aaron, and Don Sexton. There are other courses that if you don't have those 2, environmental field investigations, applications of population ecology in wildlife management. Those could also be with the correct type of discussion and development of why that course meets the criteria. Those could very well be accepted by the board. You'll notice here for each course we've got a prerequisite listed. Sometimes they're department head approvals, sometimes head approval in 60 credit hours, etc., etc. Okay, so there's one category. If you go to wildlife biology, 6 credit hours, at least 3 credit hours, as Don said, from biology 42, 14, 16, or 18. That's the biology of birds, biology of mammals, biology of amphibians and reptiles. So you need at least 3 credit hours for that, from that. Now, in order to get into any of those 4,000 level biology, you need biology 10, 20, and 10, 30 to begin with. You need, where's chordates? I guess I put it down here. Chordates, biology 2210. So the prerequisites, you need to plan this out in your degree. We urge students early on, take 10, 20, and 10, 30, because those open the door for a lot of other courses in biological sciences. So in other words, don't do 1,000 and 10, 10. So 10, 20, 10, 30 are the courses with the labs. And hence, that's why they're the prereqs. Okay? So you can use biology, the intro biology is, for example, as part of the wildlife biology category. And then you would also need one of those 4,000 level courses. And you see there's a number of others. Environment 1000 can be used here, 2000. Biogeography, 4060. Biology of fishes. And there's amphibians, reptiles, birds, etc. Okay? You can go down further. Ecology, really any ecology course will do. And I know we, in our program, we're looking at 2300 or 2390. But there's a lot of other ones here as well. Zoology, you have quite a bit of opportunity to sort of take a variety of different courses there. The one that's really critical, as I say, is chordates. That one's really tough to get into as well. If you get into it, don't drop it, because under the new regulations, once you drop a course, you get put down to the bottom of the list. You may not ever get into it again. It's a tough course, it takes a lot of effort, but if you're into this field, you really do need to have chordates, and then you'll find the upper level courses make a lot more sense and are a lot easier to complete. So 9 credit hours here in zoology. You see there's a whole variety of things you could take. Botany, as Don says, that's sometimes tougher. 9 credit hours required here. And the one that's critical, again, you need that bio 10, 20, 10, 30. You need vascular flora, which is 3242, because that's the taxonomy plant identification course that qualifies at our university. In order to get into that, you see you need a prerequisite of biology 2240 or 2242. So essentially, my suggestion there is you take 10, 20, and 10, 30. And now those are a total of 6 credit hours, right? And the Certification Review Board will consider that half of each of those courses would meet the zoology category, and half of them meet the botany. So you don't get 6 credits from 10, 20, and 10, 30 in the botany category, you get 3 credits. But then if you follow that with 2240 or 2242, one of those is the flowering plants, the other one is the non-flowering plants. There's your second 3 credit hour course, and then you slide right into biology 3242 vascular flora. Great courses, but you've got to plan for them in advance. Hard to get into, so you need to be sure on the morning of your registration you're hitting those buttons really quickly to get in. The reason these are filling up so quickly in biosciences is that the lab space is limited. So they only can attract as many students as the lab will hold. Okay, so that's the biological courses. With careful planning, you can easily do this with all the courses in an undergrad at this university. Similarly, physical sciences, 9 credits, and probably most of you already have completed, well, close to 9 in chemistry, physics, geology, soils, physical geography, etc. Quantitative sciences, the basic stats, 1,000, 2,000 certainly work, and then we know that most of these others work as well. Okay, our students have been successful in putting these forward. And you go a little further here, and this isn't a limited list. You could probably find other courses. I would urge you to check with me first, though, if you're thinking of other courses that you think might meet the criteria. Check with me first, and we'll go through it. I can even contact someone on the Certification Review Board, send them a copy of the course outline, etc., etc. And you'd have a better idea about whether these things are acceptable. And again, humanities, social sciences, 9 credit hours. And that comes from any of those disciplines there. Communications, 12 credit hours. So Tech Comm, Environment 2350, pretty much a given. And then if you're in co-op, you're going to not have a great deal of trouble meeting that 12 credit hour requirement. Because Leslie has a number of courses there that get you, if not there, will get you very close to that communication requirement. Then if you're taking things like Environment 3500, which is a projects course, if you have a special topics course like an Environment 4000, individually guided course, or you take 4500, which is our honors thesis, that's a 6 credit hour course right there, that qualifies as well under the communications category. And again, there's other courses that could potentially be used. You know, some of you I know have done sustainable water management with me. That project course, it's really a project course with a major report. Students have used that in terms of a 3 credit hour requirement there. Because it's a basic communication course, a lot of oral presentations, and a major report at the end. Policy administration and law, again, 6 credit hours. These are pretty much given because you know that they're all in the environment program at least. They're all required courses. So as I say, intro bio can be used to meet wildlife biology and botany categories. Half of the 6 credit hour total split between the two. Okay? So as I say, that hopefully will get up on our web page for those of you from other universities. Those of you at U of M who are in any of those 3 courses I mentioned, you can access it hopefully even right now. And we didn't print out copies of this. We're trying to, you know, prevent overuse of our forest resources, so we've decided to put it up on the website. The last thing I'll say, just in closing then, is you know, if your coursework is not sufficient, and I think Melanie and Jonathan both spoke to this, as did Don, don't despair. If you're in your 3rd or 4th year and you're, you know, not sure you're going to be able to make it, be creative. You know, some of you have worked as interpreters, or you volunteered at Fort White or Okamic. That could help you meet that communications credit. Even public involvement, customer service, in a position, a retail position, you know, where you're trying to sell something to the public, that could be used as part of the communications requirement. So think about work experience, your seasonal jobs, volunteering, certainly conference attendance. If you're attending various conferences, that can be seen to be to your advantage. And certainly networking, professional development, that I know Leslie hounds you in co-op about, that's a real critical part, even I think requires you to go out and do some of that kind of networking. List all those sorts of things on the application form. And as I say, remember, you need to sell yourself. And it really, when I was on the board, that's the advice we gave, that you really treat that application like an exam. And don't hesitate to run it by people who are certified. We can provide you with advice, guidance on what to do, perhaps what to do differently, etc., etc. And I think we've said all of this already before. And the idea is with proper course selection, you can make this happen. Let's do one last thing and then we can take the break. Let's just go to wildlife.org and show you what the application looks like. If I can get there. So it's under the category of Learn, down to Professional Development Certification and Certification Programs. Okay. Governance, frequently asked questions. Here's the various details that Don spoke to you about. Become a member of the Wildlife Society, etc. And here's the Associate Wildlife Biologist application. It should come in here, I believe. Yeah. So there you see it with information and online application. The degrees, completed courses, there's instructions here of how to go about selling yourself again as you fill in the application. Talking here about comparable experience, for example, can be substituted. Course credits. Note somewhere here it says at least a D or better. The grade point average doesn't really matter here. It's whether you pass the course, which is probably different than what you've heard from many places where GPA is often critical. But here it doesn't matter. As long as you get a D or better, you're in good shape. And you carry on here then. Here's the courses needed for wildlife management, understanding, manipulating wildlife habitats, population dynamics, context of human objectives and influences, conservation biology courses can count. The title, the department, the institution, course number, semester hours. Here's where you have to sell yourself, in these little course descriptions. And these things expand. You could write a whole page here if you wanted. It goes on and on.
I brought my original
good.
application,
Yeah.
and it was 17 pages
Yeah.
by the time you're done.
Yeah. You're not going to do this in one night. And if you do, you're going to get probably rejected. And then again, for each of the categories, you see the same sort of thing. There's the wildlife biology. There's the ecology. Professional or non-traditional experience. And so on and so forth. Then where we get to the references that Don spoke about, you'll see they want well, it's 35 pages to begin with, so it must have gotten longer.
You don't have to include.
No, you don't use all of this necessarily.
Yeah.
And if you get a master's thesis or a PhD thesis, you add it here. Even the honors thesis, I think you put under the category of communication. You might have publications if you've been working with others, even if you're not the primary author, but you're listed on some of your summer job experience. Maybe you're a supervisor, some published. Even if you're listed in the acknowledgements, put it up here. Other involvement is this is where we talked about being on committees, serving on an executive board for a chapter or a student chapter. And here's your references. And when you see the designation of whether or not they're CWB. So you need at least one with a CWB. There's a declaration and so on. Okay, so I think that's probably where we stop for a bit.
More than one category for the academic requirements.
Can one count, of course, one course count toward more than one category for the academic requirement? Yes, but remember there's only a maximum of 3 credit hours. But you might want to take 1.5 credit hours in one category, 1.5 credit hours in another. And the board will sometimes do that on your behalf so that you do meet the criteria as specified. So you can shift them around, but no more, the total cannot exceed the total credit hours for the course. The other thing I should have mentioned is, are environmental studies students eligible for this? And my answer is environmental studies students can find it easier to meet those requirements than environmental science students, because the non-science-based courses are all pretty much, you need to take them under studies where you don't have to take them in science. And we listed chemistry and physics first in the science and the physical science category. You don't have to do chemistry and physics. You can do soils, you can do geology, physical geography counts. So there's other courses that are not those nasty science courses that some of you don't want to be a part of, like the chemistry and the physics. They're not a requirement. But those courses in chemistry and physics will count, but they're not what you have to take.
I don't know if I have too much to add to that, really. But as Rick said, they will work on your behalf. Like if you list all the courses, and it's important that you look at the manual. And I've mentioned this a few times. Go through the manual, because in there they will, as Rick tried to say, they will say you can use half the credit for this, half the credit for that. They'll actually lay it out in there. So it's important that you do your homework and look at that manual.
You guys go.
Other questions? Go ahead.
What does the process look like after you submitted your application? Like what happens next?
Okay. Let you go. Well, you go ahead. You want it on me? I don't care.
Now,
What does the process look like after you've submitted the application? Is the question.
do you know?
Well, I do. So what happens, it goes in electronically, and it goes through the certification program coordinator at the Wildlife Society headquarters in Bethesda. So she will go through it to see if you meet the eligibility requirements. In other words, do you have a degree? Because you have to have a degree before you can apply. Have you filled in the form appropriately? You know, do you have all the sections filled in? Do the minimum course requirements, are they in place? Have you provided an email address and reference, names of references that can be contacted, all that kind of thing. So in other words, it's kind of a screening to see if you qualify. If not, they will get back to you and say you've missed this, or you need to clean up this, or this reference email doesn't work anymore, things like that. At that point, once you qualify, then they will indicate your application has been accepted, and please pay the appropriate amount. So you don't pay right away, you wait to see if it gets into the system. And once that happens, then you need to give them a credit card number, and away you go. It takes probably 4 months until you'll hear back. They have a large number of applications that come in, and the board has been increased now. It's more or less doubled in size since I was on it, because there's a representative for every one of the sections. But yeah, it still takes quite a bit of time to get through everything, to wait for the letters of reference to get back. Your transcripts have to be included, so you'll need official transcripts from the university, all those kinds of things. And you do have to have your first degree, so there's no sense doing it before you've graduated with that first degree. Okay? Question here.
I had a question about under the policy requirements. It says that you can use human dimension issues. What exactly does that mean?
Okay, so under the policy, you can use human dimension issues. In fact, we're in the process of introducing a new course in the department. Dr. Mike Campbell is joining the Environmental Science and Studies program. He was previously at the Natural Resources Institute, and his area of expertise is human dimensions in wildlife management. So what that is, it relates to the whole subject of how people perceive wildlife, their views on wildlife resources, consumptive versus non-consumptive, for example. There could be questions relating to ecotourism, questions relating to other recreational opportunities. That it really is the whole gamut of how humans perceive and use wildlife in a variety of different ways. There's cultural, there's religious components, certainly indigenous peoples components will be built into that course. Right now, what we've suggested, if there's a course that Dr. Mary Benbow teaches called Animal Geography, Animal Geographies, I guess it is, at U of M, and that one actually can be used in that category as well, because it touches on much of the same kinds of things that Campbell's new course will be developed, that he's developing, will be also focused in on. Okay? I don't know if you had any. What did you use for policy, and you remember?
Oh, look.
Because that was probably prior to us having some of the courses in environment here.
That's why sometimes you get creative.
Yeah.
Before you said sell yourself.
Yeah.
But back when I did my degree at the NRI, you needed 42 credit hours.
Yeah, right.
And then I did a 4-year BSc, plus I took 1 year of courses because I did my undergrad at U of W. And at U of W you get like a BSc in biology is what it's called, but I really wanted a BSc in zoology. So then I took a year and I took the courses that I needed. And no one told me I needed them, but I wanted them to say that I actually had all the requirements to get a zoology degree. Because I took mammalogy with Pruitt when he was still here, and some other things like that to kind of upgrade. And that was just for my own kind of personal point of pride. And then when I went to fill out all this stuff, I'm like, oh, I got that, I got this, because I spent 9 years in university. So, one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, yes, it did come in handy. Yeah, I kind of joke because, I have my BSc is framed, my master's is framed in my office, and my certification is framed. And I'm actually almost more proud of that than the other ones. But I do joke I should have also framed my letter from the bank saying I had paid off my student loans. That was just as exciting. $213 a month for 114 months. I have 2 kids, but okay, I digress. Policy administration. So, well, I took natural resources admin and law.
Okay.
Topics in natural resources management 1, policy development.
All right, so you were taking those at the graduate level?
At the graduate
Okay.
level, yeah. So sustainable development, natural resources, and mineral resources, and management and policy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So those graduate level courses have a lot of policy relations,
Yeah, so I actually had 12
Yeah.
semester hours, and you only needed 6.
Yeah, so you easily met it,
Yeah, so it worked. But again, and sometimes I would say that when people would ask me, oh, what are all the courses you need? I say, I really rambled around in university, so I'm not sure if your master's was a traditional one where, say, you only needed 12 credit hours.
Yeah.
You might find it challenging to meet the course requirements, so you may have to be a little more creative in talking about professional experience you have, or just trying to make it fit in there. And again, like you pointed out, knowing early on what courses you need so you navigate that path to get there is important.
At Lakehead, we have a program where technical people from technical schools that come, and same with Alberta. I don't know about here whether you have similar.
Oh, the articulation agreements. Yeah, we have it with UCN, University College of the North, and Lethbridge now, actually.
Okay, because talking to Lou from Alberta, he said those are the students that have no problem going through the accreditation because they've got all the techniques course. And so if you're coming from that background, use those courses.
Oh,
That's
for sure. Yeah.
Sorry, did you say that you need to have your degree to apply for the Associate Wildlife Bio or the Certified Wildlife?
No, for the associate as well.
Okay.
You cannot, they will not accept an application until you have at least 1 degree.
Okay, so you would apply after? Can you?
Upon graduation, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to show the degree was granted by the institution. Question up here.
For the policy and administration stuff, do you guys have examples of non-academic classes that would count instead? So some sort of work experience or whatever, something that's not a class that you can use instead in your creative methods?
Yeah, can't think of anything that comes directly to mind, but, well, actually, maybe I can. About 2 years ago, through the MEIA, the Manitoba Environmental Industries Association Student Chapter, there was a group of students working with a lawyer whose name I can never remember, but they were working on legal aspects of environmental law as it related to like community centers and public places in Manitoba. And so they were assisting this lawyer who was in the process of developing a report, I guess, on behalf of MEIA to the provincial government on this particular matter. So those students were, one of those students at least, did talk to me about it, and with the lawyer writing a letter of support, that was used in terms of her application. So that's an example, that's one example I can think of. I don't know, Melanie, do you have any policy-related things that, policy workshops, for example, that would potentially help?
You know, at the student level, maybe, I don't know if you work for Conservation District, assisting with their integrated watershed management plan, if you're doing consultation,
right?
Looking at policy program responses to management needs, you know, depending on.
The Office of Sustainability on campus has a lot of initiatives now that they're seeking students to help with. Some of those are policies that would be directed toward the university administration. So there's sort of, what do they call them? Student Sustainability Ambassadors. So I could see something like that if it was on the policy end. Just Google the Office of Sustainability. They've got a list of a variety of things that they would like to see students get involved with.
Public participation on the Conservation Affairs Committee for the Wildlife Society.
Yeah.
We're always looking for people.
Yeah.
Because what that committee does is we look at, say, upcoming issues or policies that are already in place, refer to the main chapter if they have a policy statement on that already, take a look at how it applies to Manitoba, and then there are times when we do write letters, to the government saying, we reviewed this and, we'd like to see action on this particular part of the policy or something like that. There's really a lot of opportunity to get involved in commenting on policy, and the folks around the table are really good at helping you understand implications of policy and how it actually plays out on the ground. So getting involved in that committee could go towards that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure even any committee where you've got to do some organizing and presenting, I think that's all good fodder, I think, but as Rick and I have mentioned, be creative, think about it.
Go ahead.
Kind of like the same question, but with respect to the botany section, because I am one of those people who's kind of like more towards the end, and I don't have a lot or any really plant courses.
Okay.
So I think vascular flora is a prereq to some of those courses that count, but it itself doesn't count. It seemed like on the list, so like, it seems like I would have to take basically 4 additional plant courses in order to qualify in that section, but like, say if I volunteered for like the greenhouse or something on campus.
It could help, yeah. If you did things like, City of Winnipeg has this native seed harvesting program. If you got involved with that, I could see that potentially helping. The Nature Conservancy out at the Tallgrass Prairie, they similarly have opportunities for people to come out and help with their seed harvesting. Fort White does the willow planting to prevent shoreline riparian erosion. They do that every fall. There's a workshop, I think, coming up in October, I think it is.
September.
September, is it? Okay.
Yeah, 30th.
Yeah. So there's a variety of things like that you could use. But if you have 1020 and 1030 biology, then you've got 3 credit hours there.
Right.
And vascular flora does count in the botany category, but you need a prereq to get into it.
Right.
So you need flowering or non-flowering plants, and then you need vascular. So that would be the 9, but again, I don't know where you're at in your degree. You may not want to hang around that long. So the other thing you could do, we haven't mentioned this actually, but there are universities that offer online instruction in some of these courses. Athabasca University, Royal Roads University in Canada, You could check out their websites. They may have something that could help you, an individual course. Oregon State University in the US, you can do an entire wildlife program online. So they would have, and it does meet the requirements for certification. And that's kind of bizarre because you think it's all online, they're never necessarily actually seeing a live animal, or maybe even a dead animal, except on a computer screen. But it has met the requirements for certification coming out of an online program at Oregon State. And there's another one, APU, the American Public University, I think it's called. And they have an online program as well, where you can become certified as a wildlife biologist. So yeah, there's creative ways now, obviously, that academic institutions are trying to make money and get into this mix as well. So, right at the back, I guess, first.
When you say we can use like work or volunteer experience for certain categories, is there a certain hour commitment of that? Like how do they quantify that?
I think what it is, like Rick said, if you build a case and if you can show, I don't know if there's a cutoff with how many hours, or there might be.
As far as what you asked about whether there's so many hours that would, I guess the easiest way to do it is Rick sat on a review board.
Yeah.
How would you handle it?
Yeah. There is some guidance in the manual. I noticed that, just looking at it the other day, on that professional experience and how to quantify it. But it's more in terms of the number of years as opposed to the number of hours. But I think if you kind of substitute the term hours for years, you could make a case based on volunteer experience over over a shorter period of time. I would think that they would certainly, well, I know that they would certainly look at it. Another way to think about it is a 3-credit-hour course is 13 weeks at Canadian universities, times 3 hours per week is 39 contact hours. So you may want to look at something in the order of 40 hours of volunteer experience being equivalent to a university course. That might be a way to do it. And if you go into the guidebook, I think it specifies the US system is a little bit higher, so you may even want to bump that up so that you don't confuse them with Canadian counting versus US counting, because yeah, their semester goes for what, 14 or 15 weeks or something, and so it's a little bit of a different total there, but they basically have said now they're just going to consider Canadian terms or semesters to be equivalent to their semesters. So, and another question, I think.
So for those of us that are in our final years and maybe don't have all the requirements, say we graduate and then took some of those online courses or volunteer after we've gotten our degree, would that still count towards it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure, no problem. Some of those people with the 20 years experience, for example, are even doing that now to supplement some of their earlier courses that they missed because they want certification that badly. They don't want to take a chance. We've got a couple in Manitoba that are looking at that now and going online to get some of the requirements that they missed.
I have a question.
Yep.
Do you think that in the future they will standardize how they address equivalencies? Because I know I have some students who have used field work and they've been certified, and I know other students have tried to use field work and weren't certified just based on it not being equivalent, and it seems maybe a little bit subjective.
Yeah, I think it tends to be subjective. It sure would be nice if the people who are not certified would write to either Dawn or the TWS president, because this is what they're trying to get away, they're trying to rectify. And I know I've heard complaints from students, and I've encouraged them to send a note, but as you say, nobody has, right?
That's exactly it. Like the president-elect is very disgruntled. He said, why hasn't anybody written it? Surely there's a lot of problems, but I guess we're shy as Canadians. But
go ahead.
So I was hoping that you guys could touch more on the professional experience part. So that's after you've done all your courses. does experience that's unpaid work towards that? And what about like technician positions and such?
I'm almost positive that volunteer work does play a role. So you can use volunteer work, but we were just talking about the criteria used in judging whether something's professional or technical, and that is an area that I think is still pretty foggy, and so I think the best thing you can do is open up a dialogue with them and say, look, I've been doing this kind of job, will that cut it, you know? And I think, as Rick and other people have mentioned, that it's important that you open this dialogue, and they don't mind if you call and ask their opinion before you, and that might help. And the thing is, it's important for me as chair of this committee that I've got to hear about these difficulties people are saying, you know. I think what happens is you get so frustrated you just throw your hands up, but if you can, now that you know I'm out here and Rick's out, let us know, because we can build up a little file, and if there's a lot of complaints in one particular area, maybe something can be done, you know. Because they're very open south of the border. I was amazed, you know. They're just willing to help in a big way.
I'll address that. Yeah, because I brought this up with Don just on the break, because the criteria that they have set out for professional work versus technical work would be a barrier to a number of people, because when I was looking at it, I was going, okay, knowing what I know about how the federal government classifies positions, you know, because you have your first bit, like I'm a BI4, so what that means is I'm, you know, in the biological sciences, and my class is a 4, and most of the people that are in my unit are about a 2, and your responsibilities at work are pretty dictated by your classification, right? So you may want to achieve, you know, what they say you need, and you wouldn't be able to within your job classification, because they want you to be the project lead, they want you to be in charge of the budget, they want you to have responsibility for the final report, things like that, which in order to meet that criteria, you do have to be at a certain level. Like I have lots of people who I work with, but ultimately I dictate the budget, the work objectives, all that kind of stuff. So actually the people who I work with wouldn't qualify as having had professional level experience, even though sometimes they might be like the site lead, or they might be the lead of a subcomponent of the project. Ultimately, the way that it's described within the manual that Dawn and I were discussing, it's like, you know what? That would be really challenging for people, and so that could be a barrier that maybe needs to be brought up. Because I did mention looking at the professional biologist criteria in Alberta, they do have a component where you can get certified as a technical biologist. And I mean, not that I'm gonna all of a sudden go, hey, why don't we do that for the Wildlife Society? But at least then, if you know perhaps, okay, within my organization, in order to progress to a certain level, you need a master's or a PhD or whatever, and your plans perhaps don't include going that far in schooling, or for example, maybe you don't want the headache of managing the budgets and HR and the reports and the meetings and all the associated stuff that goes along with being at a certain level. Maybe you actively just want to do field work, which is awesome, because that's kind of why we're here, right? Because that's the fun part, it's getting out to the field. So you may not want to be the big boss, but then what that means is really under the certification program, you're a little bit stalled, right? So maybe that's something that the certification board really needs to consider. You know, there needs to be room for people who are at the technician level, because you are a wildlife biologist when you're doing that work. You're out there and you're helping make the decisions. You just might not be ultimately responsible for all the headaches that go along with more of the professional things that they have in there.
Nothing to add, good question.
If you submit your application for the associate certification and say you didn't sell yourself enough, how long would you recommend waiting before you try again? Like, is there like a timeline so you're not like sending weekly applications?
Well, in answer to that, I guess the first thing you have to do is look at your application form. There is a clause in there that you can appeal. You can appeal. And if you really think that they didn't take a certain area very seriously, then I guess you could almost add a little bit more in your appeal. But there is an appeal process, and maybe Rick can talk a little bit more about that.
Maybe, Rick?
Go ahead.
No, I just want to ask, as a part of that question, what kind of feedback do you get if perhaps you're not accepted right away? Do they tell you, okay, this is the area that we recognize as deficiency, and then you can improve your application in there? Like, you would know.
Yeah, oh, definitely. They give you the specifics of where you fell short. And really, it'll be like a paragraph description. If you're short in wildlife management, they'll explain why. If you're short in botany, they'll explain why. So it's very detailed feedback that you get. The appeal mechanism is in place. I cannot recall, and there's very few appeals that come in. People will reapply very soon after, seeing what maybe they didn't describe a course well enough. So the board is willing to accept a further explanation, and I think they say that at the end of the letter, saying, well, you didn't quite make it, here's the deficiencies, if you can provide more information to address those deficiencies, we'll reconsider the application without another fee. So you get an opportunity to simply correct or improve, enhance, as Don said, what you originally submitted. If though you feel you're actually, or if they feel you've actually missed some courses, or they're not giving you credit for certain courses, then the appeal mechanism could, be entered into. But as I say, those are rarely successful. I don't know of any that have been successful, because the committee's pretty, they have reasons for doing what they did, and it's pretty clear that they know their stuff, kind of thing. So then the best option there would be to take another course to fill the gap. There was a student who did not get a course, and this one really, I felt was really strange. It was a scientific course taught in the Faculty of Arts, not from U of M, but from another university. And she was really disheartened because it was, I think it was a psychology, stats course out of psychology. And I mean, courses in stats and psychology are pretty, pretty in depth. And I urged her to consider reapplying. I don't think she ever did, which is most unfortunate. But well, she went on now to another job outside the province. But certainly would have been a good, I think she could have made the case for that one. I really felt so. Other questions? Some more? Go ahead.
Are there any requirements to what your initial degree is? For instance, like you were just kind of saying, I have a Bachelor of Arts, technically. Is that an issue, or as long as I can prove that I have the coursework, would it be fine in the end?
Any degree, it doesn't matter. BSc, BA, Bachelor of Environmental Science, Bachelor of Environmental Studies, any bachelor's, recognized bachelor degree from any institution, similarly at the master's level. So no restrictions. The coursework is what they're looking for. A degree plus ensuring you've met all these courses. If you have more than one degree, list them all, obviously. So, go ahead.
I just wanted clarification on the quantitative sciences part. Did GIS count for that?
Depends on the course content. It's the way to describe it. If there's a lot of quantitative requirements in the course outline, and you can sell that the course is, in fact, leads you to a thorough knowledge of quantitative methodology, then yes, for sure, it would count. Another place that I've seen GIS used is in, if you can this one may seem strange, but in policy, administration, and law. Because GIS can be used to influence not necessarily policy or law, but can certainly be, can influence administrative decisions that are being made. So clearly that's another place you could use it. But yeah, the GIS traditionally was not, it's kind of surprising they don't have GIS listed somewhere, because it's really bizarre that in this day and age we're not considering GIS as a critical part of a wildlife biologist's toolbox or toolkit or whatever, because I think it's essential. But it can certainly be used. I know Dave is trying to change the title of that GIS course here to something relating to geomatics and spatial statistics or something. And if that change does go through, then clearly that'll be a no-brainer, that it'll go through no problem with the CIP. I don't know, what did people out of Lakehead, were they using, or does Brian have them use GIS for anything?
Well, I was going to use another example. Everett Hanna, who is a professor in Lethbridge.
Yeah, University of Lethbridge.
He was telling me that he made use of a lot of his GIS courses. And so he said, whatever you do, and he told the whole committee this, he said, use them, because as Rick said, they're becoming more and more accepted now. And at Lakehead, in the forestry program, it's a vital part. I think if you read the manual, they try and keep away from the introductory level. I think if you get up into additional courses, then by the sound of it, they will accept it. I think it's right in the manual now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the list that you guys had for the courses for the University of Manitoba is fantastic. How would other universities go about making their own list?
Well, that's what Don's going to be working on. He's retired now, so he's got lots of time.
No, just to give you a little background, it's only U of M right now and Lakehead University that has done their homework and has all the courses. But Rick is right, we're going to be reaching out to the different universities. And we were just talking about, we as educators, we have a lot of say in what goes into programs. I know at Lakehead, when I was first hired way back in the 70s, but back then the forestry department had no fish and wildlife whatsoever. They made a decision to bring in a couple of us educators to bring in fish and wildlife. That fish and wildlife course flourished in forestry, and that was really good because at that time the foresters, the management plans were there was just a couple of pages at the end, other uses, and that covered. Now it's the reverse, there's a little bit like that, and there's just so I guess the take-home lesson is that if we can get some key people in some of these universities, change can happen. But I think Rick and I will attest that sometimes it's a long process. So we have to, like Jack Ward Thomas, I remember his big things when I talked to him, he said, you got to plant the seeds. You got to plant the seeds. He said, don't worry if your credit doesn't come to you. He said, you got to plant those seeds. I always remember that. So that's what we're doing, planting seeds.
I'll just point out, it is possible to crosswalk those classes, because I did my undergrad at UFW. I sit on the curriculum committee for Assiniboine Community College, and we have a meeting next week, and that's what Don and I were talking about, I've never really looked at the community college stuff, and I haven't looked at BU, but I'm not offering really, formally that I do that, but informally, I am going to look at that so that I can, take a look at ways to coach students out there to ensure that they're, good for certification. But yeah, you do need a champion because you need someone at U of W just to put those courses together. I did it on my own, but sometimes you did have to be creative, and yeah, so it's easier if you've got the list already put together.
Yeah. But I'm sure Susan could do that very easily.
Yeah.
You know, why not? She could look at the list that we've got, and I can send that to you. And
Yeah.
why not? Let her sort of follow that template. And I know that's what we're trying to use, I think, across the country. And basically, that just pick courses that fit those categories, and it's not a, you know, not a hard task. I think there was another question. Yeah.
I just wanted to know, like, as professionals that have had your certification for a long time, what has been your, like, most rewarding aspect of having, or, like, maintaining your certification?
Well, my example is I was called as an expert witness in BC about, before I was certified, but I had a PhD already. So I was certified, or at least I had the qualifications. But in the court, the Provincial Court of British Columbia, the opposition, and I was representing the defendants, or the plaintiff side of the lawyer, grilled me for a day and a half on the stand in front of a judge as to why I should be considered an expert witness. And it eventually was approved, which then meant I was qualified, is what they call it, as an expert witness in any provincial jurisdiction, any provincial court in Canada. Once I got certified, I was told by the legal community that that day and a half of grilling goes out the window. That you automatically become an expert witness just by showing that credential or discussing that credential in front of the judge. And so the lawyers don't even get involved in all this hassle. But it was a ridiculous experience because they were trying to trip me up. Now, did you take this course, and when did you take it? And you know, finally the judge, I remember saying, you know, you've asked Dr. Baydack the same question in 6 different ways. You'd asked some of those same questions yesterday, and you know, really, he's answered them to my satisfaction. Let's get on with it. And finally ended the system. But it was, you know, kind of a neat experience sitting in front of a judge in a courtroom and having all these questions asked to you. And now, what year did you actually do that? And what did the lab entail? The day that you were in your court aids lab, what did you actually do in that class? Like, it was insane. And you couldn't say it, but the lawyer who was representing the side I was on said, don't say you don't remember. Because that's devastating. So you've got to come up with something. So, and then you've had, I'm sure, I won't know what your experiences are. But.
Well, my experience are very, there's a lot of them, but they're all tied to education and working with professionals. And as I tried to, I was one, there was a couple of us that were in the forestry department. All the rest were foresters, and they were all certified. So it was very important that, as students say, it's very important that I was professional so that they could communicate back and forth with me. There was no thinking, oh, no, it's not. He's not, so it won't. But there's a number of different times when this certification was really beneficial. But I think the most important part was just the mentoring students. Being an educator, that was really important, and I felt I couldn't mentor them about certification if I wasn't a mentor. So it's as simple as that. And some of the more gratifying conversations I've had is with students and seeing the spark in their eyes. Yeah, I should follow it, even though they don't.
I would say probably the best, highest use of my certification was dealing with community pastures. Because at Canada, we used to own community pastures before Harper divested them. 3.2 million acres of intact grasslands. We had 31 species at risk with very complex processes and procedures in place to protect those species at risk. And we had a lot of oil and gas development, gravel extraction, ran cattle. These were fairly well-used working landscapes, and we were able to put processes in place to protect them. I mean, it took a lot of working with community pastures and the people that ran them, because even though we were the same department, technically they were a separate branch, and we were a branch that gave the recommendations for how to deal with the species at risk and mitigations and all that type of stuff. And it was very important that I present myself as an expert so that they would listen to me, because you're dealing with engineers and you're dealing with professional neurologists and things like that, and very angry engineers when you try and tell them, no, you're not doing that. You are not putting a pipeline plow through piping plover habitat during nesting season. You're just not. And they push you very, very hard, right? With very strong language. And you know, so I had to be able to stand up to them and say, look, no, I'm certified, same way you're certified. I know what I'm talking about. Environment Canada knows what, you know, they knew of my certification, so I was able to advocate on the processes and procedures and mitigations to be put in place whenever construction was going on. And yeah, the certification was a big deal. They wouldn't listen to the fact I had a master's and that I'd been working in the field forever, but for some reason the certification was important to them. So that was important. Not that we're in charge of them anymore. Yes, some of them still there.
Anything else? Justine, did you have, there's one.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, the email that's on the brochure here, does that go directly to you too, or is there like a different? Oh, it does, okay.
Mine was up on the screen. Rick.Baydack.
Actually, is there any chance you could like email information from the PowerPoints out to people, or?
Yeah, I can, what I'll do is are you in, which courses are you in?
Actually, I'm a UW student.
Oh, UW. So why don't I send everything to Linnea, and then you can distribute it as appropriate?
Or can it be put on the TWS?
Or maybe you want to do it that way, yeah.
So then everyone can access it.
The Manitoba chapter website, sure. Why don't we just send it up there? Is that better? I can do both. I'll send it to Linnea as well. We've also got the videotape. I don't know, what are you going to do with it? You're going to put it on the seats?
Yeah, we'll hope to get it on the website, the Manitoba
Yeah,
chapter
so it'll be up
website.
on the website too.
So did you want all of our presentations or mainly Rick's?
Well, PowerPoint-wise is mainly Rick's, but yeah, overall, all of you guys, sure. But yeah.
Sure.
We should check if the Skype participants have anything to say.
Do the Skype participants have anything to say?
I don't know.
Any questions?
I think it was all covered.
All covered. Justine, did you have some provocative questions for us?
No, they're mostly covered. It was mostly just to get the ball rolling, but everything's went pretty well.
Okay. I don't know, last word, Don, the last words should be from you.
Wait, actually, no, there was one more
Go
thing.
ahead.
When can you apply again? Like, if you apply and you find out you fall short, and what's like, is there like a minimum amount of time you have to wait before you can apply again?
Well, they'll let you know in the letter if it's things that they think you might be able to correct with the reapplication. I think you have like a 6-month period to try to answer their questions and reapply. Because you may not get rejected, you know, just, it's not a blanket rejection, sorry you're not in. They're trying to help you to get in. So it may be, you know, if you can spruce up this section, if you can explain this section a little better, then reapply. And I think that's usually within a 6-month period. So it's a reapplication with the initial payment, the initial fee payment. If you choose to reapply after you take another course or two, then, I mean, there's no limit. You can reapply whenever. But the question then would be, well, you would have to pay another fee, another application. So.
Okay, in closing, I'd just like to say that the certification program lives and dies with you guys. If you don't come through, like right now, it's hard to believe, there's only 5 AWBs in Canada. That is serious, because we get CWBs, we depend on us CWBs depend on you guys to fill our ranks. So I guess it's over to you guys.
Part of what happens, unfortunately, I've had several students who became AWBs, got into the working environment, and as Melanie says, didn't pay attention maybe to their fact that their certification was lapsing. They eventually get a letter, or sometimes they can't even be found anymore because the emails don't work. They don't even realize that they've missed the opportunity then to apply to become a CWB. There's only 5 active right now, but there's probably many, many more that basically lost their certification by not doing anything about it. Or maybe their lives changed, career changed, who knows. But I mean, I know a number of my students who are no longer on the list, but they're not CWBs either. But they had applied, they got the AWB, and I mean, I don't even know where some of them are. So they lose it, unfortunately.
If you do lose track of time and you lose it, can you reapply and get it again and start over?
I'm pretty sure you can. You also talked about the extension.
Yeah, that was one of the options I gave you. If like with the AWB, you have 10 years to get the 5. Is that what you're talking about, or?
Oh, well, I think so. I was meaning, because he was saying that he had people who lost out and didn't become CW.
Right.
Yeah.
If they went back and they got 5 years, then they can apply because they've already got the courses checked off.
Okay.
And there's another application. There's a whole series of applications. I tried to summarize it in the brochure. A series of, if people forget or don't make.
But it's weird because the couple who I know, former students who got, went past the 10-year limit, and I'm like, why didn't you? And they had 5 years of work experience, and they're like, oh, I can't be bothered. I've got a good job now. Just no reason.
Yeah, so you do have to kind of be self-motivated to do it. Like I said, I mean, I had no job requirement for me to do it. I mean, my boss had no clue even what it meant. She's a wheat germ pathologist, so she didn't know what it meant, but it was important to me and it made a big difference in what I was doing. But, I mean, even that being said, I had to admit, right? I let my CWB renewal date go by, so technically I'm not, but I don't have to reapply, I just have to. And I did, I put in my paperwork for renewal, so I'm just waiting. It takes weeks for them to go through everything. But yeah, you gotta keep on it and decide that it's something that you value. And I know we're sitting here, one thing that could be daunting is, well, you heard there are only 45 in Canada, so you might be thinking, well, geez, mustn't have much cachet if no one's doing it, right? Here we're trying to tell you guys, look, it's really valuable. Oh, but only 45 have it. But don't listen to that. It's really valuable. Because it is self-perpetuating. The more CWB people are out there, the more people understand what that certification means, and it starts to create a demand for it. Again, for the professional biologists in Alberta, that is a requirement in order to work in the field. You must be certified that way. And that requirement doesn't come up in job postings here in Manitoba, and that's something that we need to work with different departments to help them understand the advantage so that it does create a market for it, so then it does confer that advantage to you guys to have that certification.
Go ahead.
Just to add to what you guys are saying, what I find really appealing about the certification process. So when I first got to university, I said, oh, I'm interested in conservation and wildlife. And the options were, okay, go for a bachelor's in science and major in biology or environmental studies. But when people ask me what I was going to do after my degree, you can't really give them that concrete like what you're doing, but going and working towards something and saying, oh, I want to become a certified wildlife biologist. That's what I really like about this. So having that kind of that end point and working towards something, I think that would be what's appealing to me as a student.
Go ahead.
So if, just say like you get certified by the Wildlife Society, and that applies like all over Canada, right? So I could work like in Alberta if I wanted and still have that certification as the Alberta one.
RP Bio or whatever it's called, Registered Professional Biologist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be the same.
You can answer that better than I, because you've had some discussions, I think.
You're asking whether you can have both of them. Is that what you're
Well,
asking?
can you automatically,
equivalent.
Yeah.
is it, that's what you're working on trying to establish.
That's exactly one thing, our mandate is reaching out to these 3 provinces with their own certification and seeing how we can dovetail with their operations. And so it's too early to say right now, but we've got some feelers out there. Our committee is set up with key people. We have one person who is liaison with the Alberta people. We have one person liaison with the BC people. And that BC person is already, next week, he's bringing in the registrar of the BC group, and they're going to talk. And so he's going to talk on behalf. So there's lots of stuff going on in the background that I tried to tell you a little bit about it, but there's we're doing a lot, like the Canadian section is doing a lot in the background for a lot of you. So.
But right now, if you're registered in Alberta and you move to BC,
yeah.
They do not accept a registration from Alberta. You have to reapply and become registered in BC. So it's just ludicrous. It's a bit of a moneymaker, it seems like, to some of us, that each of these institutions wants to build their own, bank accounts and build their little empires.
And I know the Alberta accreditation pretty well because my daughter had to be certified. She's a biologist. And it's big money every year. And you have to recertify every year. The Wildlife Society is every 5 years, but every year, and you've got to jump through a lot of hoops.
And our Wildlife Society renewal fees are pretty minimal compared to what they're paying in Alberta or BC, or I don't know about Quebec, but
It's $25 to renew once you're certified.
Yeah.
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years. I think it's so they print you off a new certificate.
Yeah. Anything else?
This has been great. Lots of good feedback.
Well, I think we should all give a big round of applause to Justine who put this together. It couldn't have been done without her initiative, and Emily for doing the videotaping today and helping Justine. I think. And I guess we should thank the Cooperative Education Program that provided lunch up here. So Leslie's not here, but